Joining me right now is former New York City Mayor, President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani. And Rudy, it is wonderful to have you this weekend. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Maria.
So I know that you've been working all weekend on this. The first question everybody wants to know is, what is the evidence the president has alluded to in terms of ballot fraud? What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of evidence. Let me see if I can summarize it by state. Some of it developed, ready to go into a lawsuit tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday. In Philadelphia, we're the furthest ahead. We have about 60 or 70 witnesses in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and in Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, we have observers who were for 24 hours kept out of the room or kept away from the room where they were counting the mail-in ballots, which of course are the highly suspicious ballots. During that period of time, at least 135,000 ballots were counted, none of which were observed by any Republican observer, as the law requires, and as is really necessary, given the fact that these ballots came in late. They were being brought in by bundles. It looked very much like they were trying to make up the 700,000 difference that they had from election night. Then you go all the way across the strait to Pittsburgh, and we have exactly the same situation happening. Republican observers being kept so far away that they had to try to use binoculars to see the ballots. They couldn't accomplish that. They count about 300,000 ballots that went through that process. And even though we went to court and we were allowed to move 6 feet closer, the Democrat machine people moved the counting place 6 feet further away. This is documented on videotape. There are upwards of 50 witnesses, and this will be the subject of a lawsuit that we file tomorrow for violating civil rights, for conducting an unfair election, for violating the law of the state, for treating Pittsburgh and Philadelphia different than the rest of the state, which is an equal protection violation, which goes under Bush v. Gore. I mean, this is something that just has to be addressed. There are at least, and it's going to go up, Maria, I know it, because we haven't even analyzed Lackawanna County yet. So we're at now 450,000 definite mail-in ballots that they separated from the envelope, threw the envelope away. We can never tell if they're valid or not. They could all have been done by one person, and we didn't get a chance to observe. It is required that both sides observe. And why wouldn't they let us observe? You have to be stupid not to figure out why. Because for 3 days they were laboring mightily to make up the 700,000 vote deficit they had in a city that is an epicenter of voter fraud. Over the last 60 years, there have been so many cases of voter fraud in Philadelphia. Joe Frazier voted in the 2018 election 5 years after he was dead. Will Smith's grandfather voted twice after he died. So then we're going to be looking at dead persons' ballots, which may actually be very, very substantial. And then another one that might be just as challenging, except we need a little more time. There was a lot of backdating of votes that came in after the deadline, and we have evidence now from not only the post office but from others that there was backdating. I can only tell you right now that amounts to about 2,000 or 3,000 votes, but that could be much, much bigger. Then we have dead people voting. We haven't analyzed that yet.
Right.
And then we have people who say they didn't vote, or they did vote and their vote hasn't been registered. You put that all together, we're up to about 800,000 to 900,000 votes that were completely invalid. And we only had 3 days of investigation. In Michigan, we have a similar situation. Numbers a little bit less.
So the president is going to be dropping these lawsuits tomorrow. I mean, what can you tell us about how many? Is this state-by-state lawsuits? Is this one big lawsuit? And do you believe that you have enough to actually change the fate of the election?
Well, I think we have enough to change Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania election was a disaster. I mean, I only gave you the highlights. I mean, we have people that observe people being pushed out of the polling place. We have people who were suggested to vote the other way and shown how to do it. I'm giving you the big picture. where the numbers are such that you could reverse the call. That is the 450,000 that would not observe of mail ballots. And remember, the mail ballots were set from the beginning to be fraught with fraud. And instead of taking more care with them, they handled it like a Star Chamber proceeding. They literally counted these ballots in secret. And they counted these ballots in secret for only one reason. These ballots were always the ballots they were going to use to try to catch up if they were behind. And it is not a coincidence that it happened in 8 different Democrat states, which means it had to be an order from somewhere. So where do we have them? We have big numbers, definitely in Michigan. Not quite the numbers that we have in Pennsylvania, but enough to overturn the result there. It looks like we're going to have very big numbers in Nevada. We have pretty big numbers in Wisconsin. We have 4 or 5 witnesses already in Georgia. We have similar numbers in Arizona. So we got 5 states in which we have the same 3 issues. Not being allowed to look at the mail-in ballots at all.
Right.
People who have backdated, where we have backdated entries. In other words, if it's supposed to be in by close of business on the 3rd, it actually says the 4th. They change it to the 3rd. And then we have dead people voting. And we have people whose vote wasn't counted. That's in all of those states. And I think the first lawsuit will be Pennsylvania. The second will either be Michigan or Georgia. And over the course of the week, we should get it all pulled together. But those are facts of fraud, not allegations of fraud. Yesterday, I can't show all the witnesses. First of all, they're scared. But I showed 2 of the 50 witnesses. In fact, now we've shown 3 of the 50 witnesses. And I'd be happy to put out 1 or 2 more just to show people. They say to you, where's the evidence? I point to the witness. There's the evidence, my friend. I know Democrats aren't used to it. It's called a witness taking an oath, swearing under oath.
So you're saying that this is not episodic local situations and mistakes about dead people. You're saying this is systematic. You're saying this is systemic.
10 states. Well, I'll tell you what's systemic. Not allowing us to see the mail ballots. And I'm going to I know why. I think we can prove by circumstantial evidence and a little bit of direct evidence. This was a nationwide plan by the Democrats to catch up.
But Rudy,
so you don't keep people.
Are you being flat-footed? I mean, did you get flat-footed? We were talking about the potential for cheating. I mean, even I said, look, it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt after we know what happened in 2016 with the coup. I mean, going into this, so how come the observers weren't in place? Were you flat-footed now after the election?
No. Why do you think we know about it? Because the observers were in place and they were pushed out of place. The first lawsuit was brought on the day of the election. We couldn't have brought it any earlier. The first lawsuit in Philadelphia was brought on the day of the election. The day after the election, while they were counting, the court allowed us to be 6 feet closer, and they moved 6 feet away. No, we brought this at the earliest possible moment that it started.
You've got 10 lawsuits coming out this upcoming week.
Right now, we have 1. We have 2 that are being drafted, and the potential is 10. We haven't investigated all the rest of those states, but we have evidence in the rest of those states. You want an estimate? By the end of the week, we'll have 4 or 5.
Before you go, where is the Department of Justice? Where is Bill Barr on this? If this was systemic and you've got all of this evidence, where is the DOJ?
The answer to that is I don't know, and I can't worry about it. And when you say we were flat-footed, that really isn't fair. I mean, we had about 8,000 people out there, and they started registering these complaints at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And the legal team here took action immediately. All during Election Day, we were bringing actions in court so we can preserve this. But, you know, it takes a while to collect 2,000 affidavits, of which we have about half now.
Okay. So, in other words, you're saying that will the president concede anytime soon, I guess, is my final question, given all of this?
It really would be wrong for him. At this point, it would be wrong for him to concede. There is strong evidence that this was an election that in at least 3 or 4 states and possibly 10, it was stolen. In other words, it was based on false votes. Now, you can't let an election go into history without challenging that. I mean, Gore got 2 months to challenge it.
Rudy?
I would think they'd give him at least the 2 months, right?
Through the federal court system, how long will this take?
I am, and I'm not the only one doing this. There are many, many lawyers. We're all doing it as fast as we possibly can, consistent with being able to put it together correctly. I think the Pennsylvania situation...
Are you expecting it to go to the Supreme Court? Are you expecting it to go to the Supreme Court?
I do. I mean, I can't predict that. Nobody can predict it. But, you know, more likely than not, this is not going to get resolved at the state court level. I mean, they're not going to accept a decision of, you know, disqualifying 500,000 votes in Pennsylvania, and we are sure not going to accept a decision that doesn't take account of the fact that we were cheated.
Rudy, we're going to talk with Sidney Powell later in the show, and I'm going to ask her about this Dominion software system. I just wonder.
She knows a lot more
that there
about
were
that
some
than
glitches. Okay.
There were.
Rudy, it's good to see you this morning, of course.
There's some that have.
Yep.
Well, and Sydney's on top of that. She knows the whole thing.
We will talk with her later on in the program. Thank you so much for joining us. We, of course, will be covering this, Rudy. Thank you.
Yeah, there'll be plenty more this week. Plenty more.
Rudy Giuliani.